Everyone. On today's video, we're talking about the 12 emotional intelligence questions you can ask in an interview. So Peter, let's just start at the top. What is emotional intelligence?
So emotional intelligence, it can really be broken down into 5 things. There's self-awareness, motivation, empathy, self-regulation, and then social skills. Emotional intelligence is kind of what is used in what's traditionally known as soft skills. Like that's the thing that makes you really good at understanding your emotions and other people's emotions.
Yeah, I think of emotional intelligence as behavior. What
Yep.
can you expect from a candidate in a specific situation? And that's a really important thing in the hiring process because you're trying to assess what you can expect from the individuals who are going to join your team. And that's, of course, there's technical skills that you want to assess. You want to know what someone's background is professionally, but how they're going to react from day to day is as important as anything else. And I could argue that it may be the most important thing when you're hiring someone to join a team.
Yeah, I mean, you can teach people technical skills. You can't really teach them a lot of these soft, what's called soft skills. People, unless they're going to be just working in a cubicle by themselves and never talking to anybody, you're going to be dealing with other people. So having emotional intelligence, understanding other people's motivations, their emotions, those are the things that are going to make somebody really successful as a candidate in the workplace, I think.
Absolutely. Now there's a scientific test that's 100 questions you could ask, but most organizations, most companies aren't going to do that. Most candidates certainly don't want to sit through that as part of the interview process. That's time consuming. It can be expensive. So we wrote a blog recently on 12 specific questions you can ask in the interview process to really help narrow down what you could expect from that candidate. So let's go through those 12 and just start at the top. So I'll let you kick it off.
Yeah. So the first one, what makes you angry at work? It's a really straightforward question, and you can get a lot out of a candidate just by asking them that. You can see how it's not only necessarily what their answer is. While that is important, you can see what actually annoys them, how they regulate their own emotions, but how they answer the question will tell you a lot as well. It's going to be a great indicator of whether they'll fit into your current work environment, or if they're going to, there's any red flags that are going to stand out.
Absolutely. And emotional intelligence is so much about self-awareness. And this is an opportunity for that individual to reflect. And it's not a question that most people are going to be prepared for. It's a question that hopefully the candidate really digs deep and answers honestly, but you'll learn a lot by asking that question. That's for sure. So the next one I really like is, what has been the proudest moment in your career? That really speaks to what's important to that individual. And once again, you're going to learn a lot from that question.
Yeah, you're going to see, the people who answer things with a lot of like, I did this or I do that. It's good and it's great to be proud of your accomplishments, but you want to see the people who they kind of rope other people. They use the term we. They talk about things that they've done that have affected other people and how it's been kind of reciprocal, because you'll see a lot of people who answer that who are saying, we did this or we succeeded this way. Those are going to be team players, and that's going to be something that's really nice, I think, for a lot of positions.
Yeah, we think about that a lot with athletes, professional athletes, when you see them in an interview. And last night just happened to be the final game of the NBA Finals. The championship was won by the Boston Celtics. And I loved seeing the player that was interviewed was talking about, Jason Tatum is his name. He just said we the whole time. And without naming names, there's another very famous basketball player who's won a number of championships over the past 10 years. And he would always say, I did this, my team. And you just know that there's an entirely different environment that's created by one individual versus the next. So I versus we, a very important indicator of how someone's going to behave once you hire them, if you hire them.
Yeah.
So what's next?
So the third one, this is one I really like. Are you close with your coworkers in your current position? Now, I'll preface this by saying everybody is not going to be best friends with everyone they work with. We all know that. But being able to relate to your coworkers and to see them as, multifaceted people who have, emotions of their own, that is a really good tell of somebody who's got a high EQ level, somebody who can empathize with other people, somebody who can relate to other people, who can, at the very, minimum, they can get along with other people. I mean, that's, the core foundation of any position is being able to get along with your coworkers in a professional way.
And that's a critical component of almost every scenario. But I say almost because if you are truly an individual contributor who doesn't really need to interact with a lot of people day to day, you could sit in a corner, you could get your job done without relying on a lot of interaction day to day. It may be okay if you're not much of a team player. And I would say that for some positions, it's probably important that you don't have to rely on a lot of teamwork and support. But to your point, it really speaks to how the individual is going to, once again, behave in the role. So the next one is, who inspires you as a person? And the reason why this question is so great, it really tells you who who this candidate is trying to emulate, who they want to be like, who they want to model themselves after, because that's a great indication of who they're striving to be.
Yep. Yeah, I like that. It's a fun question because, like we said earlier, like a lot of these questions aren't things that people are thinking of. You're generally not going to expect in an interview for someone to be like, "Who inspires you?" You're like, "Oh, okay." It shows you who they're trying to work towards, or what they're trying to work towards, who they're trying to be in their ideal, in their ideal world, what they would, their life would look like, which tells you a lot about a person. So I like that question.
And that's the goal of the interview as a whole, is you want to get to know the candidate as intimately as you can. In addition, as you said earlier, qualifying them technically for whatever the job is, but knowing what they can do is very different than knowing who they are. And that's really what these questions are all about. So let's go on to the next one.
Yeah. So the next one is, when did you have to adapt in your work environment? Being adaptable is huge in really any job, because unless you're a machine working on an assembly line and doing the exact same thing every day, things are going to change. Things are going to come up in your job that are different from the previous day. You're going to need to adapt, to change, to kind of make sure that you are fitting what the role needs at that moment. So being able to understand what the situation is and adapt your behavior to that that's going to tell you a lot about a candidate. And I think that's a really important one to ask.
Especially in the times that we're living in and working in, whether it's working remotely, working from work, coming back to the office. These are big changes, and you don't want the candidate that you're interviewing, if they become your employee, to get too distracted. AI is forcing change on us, whether we want it or not. And you have to be willing to embrace that in most positions. And again, it's important to put out that not every position, not all of these questions aren't necessarily relevant to every role, but the collection of them really speaks to most jobs, most organizations would really find value in them as a whole. So that's what we're really going for. But when you look through these 12, it's important to pick and choose which ones are matter most to you, right? Because if you know your job doesn't require change and you don't foresee that it ever will, and you're going to be happy with someone who just wants to do the same thing over and over, well, that's an important thing to understand too, right? You don't want to necessarily hire someone who's going to get bored when the scenery never changes. So you really have to apply these to your specific organization and the role that you're hiring for.
Yeah, they're gonna give you a holistic view of the person. What you do with that information, that is up to you as a hiring manager. But it's still better to know rather than not know that this person is either good at adaptability, bad at it, they want to do it, they don't want to do it, they want to work alone, they don't want, like, all of these things are important things to know that you can use to frame, how you go on to the next question, or what decision you make. So I think they're good. I think they're good even if they aren't relevant to that specific position.
So this next one is deep. Have you ever hurt someone because of your mistakes, and how did you recover from it? So,
Yeah.
like so many of these questions on the surface, the candidate may not have an immediate answer. So highly encourage letting them pause, think about it, come up with something that's real and meaningful to them. And boy, you're going to learn a lot from this question.
Yeah, this is a really kind of out there question that a lot of people aren't going to ask in an interview. But asking somebody to pause and actually think, like, how did your actions affect someone in a negative way? A lot of people, it makes people uncomfortable, frankly. This is something that I would suspect if you ask a lot of candidates, particularly ones that don't have high emotional intelligence, they're going to struggle a little bit with this one. So being able to not only answer it, but to take accountability for, your actions and how you either made it better or learned from it. That is, that's kind of the gold standard of an answer is what I would look for.
Absolutely. Now let's bring it let's bring it up a little bit, and with this next question, when did you have a positive impact on someone? Now that's a question we all want to answer, right? We feel much better
Yeah.
about that. And it is interesting if someone struggles to answer that one, that tells you a lot just in and of itself, right? We might struggle to say, hey, what did we do wrong? But if we struggled to say what we did right, yikes, a little bit, right? I think that's kind of scary.
Yeah, it's going to be it'll be interesting for a candidate that's stumped by it, because you can kind of see it going two different ways. People are going to either answer very straightforward, or they're going to have a more nuanced take where they're like, I was able to help X, Y, and Z in this way, as opposed to just being like, I did this and it was good for this person. This is one of those questions I almost want to see like how they answer it more than what the specific thing they did was.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. So with this next one, we like to talk about everyone always talks about the what is your biggest weakness question. Well, that one is often you don't get the most out of that question. I don't think it's not one of my favorites, because everyone knows it's coming. Everyone has a canned answer for it if they've done any interview preparation at all. But this one, what is your greatest strength and how did you use it to your advantage? You're really talking about what someone values, and some of these questions are focused on that, but it's really going to tell you what's going to be important to them, right? And that's something you always want to know about a candidate you're considering bringing on board.
Yeah, you can answer it in a lot of different ways. So it's really good because, like you said, the weakness one, that's a very rehearsed one. This is one where they get a little bit of a chance to brag, but you obviously don't want to see somebody who's too full of himself and is bragging too much about things and maybe putting others down. So there's ways that you can answer this question as a candidate that kind of show that you are part of, you recognize that you didn't do everything by yourself. I've had candidates answer that their greatest strength is that they get along well with their team, and in a team-based environment, that's a great answer, where they explained like, hey, my team has succeeded on this project and I was able to be part of that and I was so happy. I've also seen candidates who said that their greatest strength is that they're able effectively, in less words, to boss people around. So you can kind of see where people who have low emotional intelligence are going to answer in a certain way. They're not going to kind of take the broader aspect into account. And this is a really good one.
Yeah, it's interesting that you would phrase it that way, because how you answer these questions is as indicative of someone's emotional intelligence as the answer themselves. And so just the way they approach them, do they have enough awareness to realize the intent of the question and not shoot themselves in the foot unintentionally? That's a great way of assessing someone's emotional intelligence. All right, what next?
So the next one is, how would you handle a coworker who wasn't doing their job? So this one's a little tricky for a candidate, because you don't want to come across as somebody who's, kind of stepping out of their lane and is like, people watching other people, especially if it's not a manager position. If you're an individual contributor, you don't want somebody who's overly concerned with how others are doing their job, because obviously that's the manager's job, is to make sure their team is working. But you want somebody who has enough awareness of the situation to understand how their actions affect the greater whole of the business. And so somebody who can answer that with a well thought out answer, with explaining that I did X, Y, and Z because of this, and it affected this. Like, that's somebody I want to see their thought process. I want to see that they recognize that while it's not their main role to police the company, they should, when appropriate, stand up and say, hey, this isn't right.
And you and I've talked about this one before in a different context. It really speaks to whether you think, whether the individual sees himself as someone who just wants to be a peer and a friend, and avoid conflict at all cost, or take pride in what the organization's mission is and step up and do something about it, even if they're not a direct manager. It's a really tough position for an individual to be in. No one wants to be in that position, but anyone who's in the professional world for any period of time, they're going to find themselves dealing with it. So asking it on the front end really gets into the mind of the individual, and will be a really good indication of what they're probably going to have to face if you hire them.
Yeah, you're going to see people who who are conflict averse. A lot of people are. Probably, I would say the majority of people don't like dealing with conflict. It's not a comfortable subject. So this is going to be kind of where you're going to start to kind of suss that out of people. And that actually leads us into our next question, which is, have you argued with a coworker and how did you resolve it? Kind of the same vein, where you are looking here to see, did they handle it in a constructive way? Everybody has argued with their coworkers. I would say it's a very small minority of people that get along with everyone. And if they do, they're probably arguing internally with themselves. So conflicts, they're going to happen. You just want to see that they're handling it in a constructive way, that they're not getting, nasty or emotional in it, and that they are actually trying to get something out of it to actually move past it, and not just, dwell on this person did this and I'm angry about it.
Yeah, back to where we started. When I think of emotional intelligence, I think of behavior. And this question really gets to the heart of, how are you going to behave when you're faced with conflict? No one wants it. We want to avoid it, but it is inevitable. And how someone answers this question, like we've been saying, it's not about what the answer is. It's just about their ability to reflect, and acknowledge that they were in that situation, and then had a plan to deal with it. None of us are prepared when it happens, or at least very few of us are, but how we react in the moment is so telling. And the better the answer you're going to get on this, the deeper understanding you're going to have of the person you're interviewing.
Yeah, you don't want, it speaks lower of a person if they're like, oh, I never argue with someone, or, oh, I did this and moved on. Like, people being able to admit when they were wrong and to deal with it and learn from it, that shows a level of intelligence and maturity that I think a lot of hiring managers are frankly looking for. The next question that we've got on here is, how do you recover after a failure? What if you were wrong in a situation, or you failed in a situation? What did you do about it? That is a huge question, because it's going to happen. Everybody is going to make mistakes. And it's less the mistake that's the important thing, is what did you do after the mistake?
This one really has a deep meaning for me individually, because early in my career, I did have a significant failure that I had to deal with. And I reference that situation a lot. It's had a big impact on my development and career in the 20 plus years since it happened. Gosh, closer to 30 years. I'm embarrassed to say, but it was a meaningful thing. And in the moment, it was awful. But on the other side of it, I was a much better employee, professional person as a whole, gained maturity. I mean, so much came out of it. So if I were being asked that question, I would love to answer it, because it did have such a meaningful impact. And I think those who don't have that experience probably aren't if you haven't gone through it, you don't necessarily know how you'd handle yourself emotionally. So I would say be wary of someone. If you're hiring for a seasoned role, a management role, an executive role, anything that's more than entry level, you really should press for a solid answer on that, because I'm someone who strongly believes that you need some adversity and failure to improve.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, the saying that experience speaks a lot better than book learning. People who have only ever been in a kind of hermetically sealed environment, for lack of a better word, that they've never really had to deal with anything difficult. They've never really had to deal with failure. Those kinds of people, if they haven't been tested, they don't really ever know how they're going to react. So people who've been able to do that, come through stronger on the other side, they're going to be higher quality candidates. Somebody who can actually answer that question with a thoughtful response. That is somebody that I would rather deal with. So
absolutely. And we'll wrap it up with the last question. How do you deal with difficult people? I think this is a higher level question than some of the other ones that we've asked. It's an easier one, because it's not asking for specific scenarios. So it's not my favorite on the list. It's a 12 on our list of 12. But if you are having a difficult time, I should use a different phrase there. If you're having a tough time drawing out specific answers from people, or if you're interviewing a candidate who is junior, this is a question you could ask, because it gives them the ability to answer a question from their, maybe not from their professional life, from their life before or outside of work, if they're young, from school, from being on a team or a club or a group. We all have to deal with difficult people throughout our life. So it's a bit of a softer way to get to the heart of some of these deeper questions, but it's one that definitely you can draw upon if you're having trouble getting specific examples.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is one where it's like, you, by this point in the interview, if you've asked some of these other questions, you should get an idea of how they're going to deal with difficult people. You understand their emotional level. This is a really good question for lower level, entry level positions, people who haven't, and it kind of gives them a chance to shine. Customer service facing positions, obviously you have to deal with a lot of difficult people all the time. Trust me, I know, I worked in it. So this is it's kind of a more of a softball question, but it's good for lower level positions, entry level, where they can, as long as they can explain it in a thoughtful way. I think that it's worth knowing.
I'm really glad you made that point, because for customer facing roles, this question really can help you a lot, because if you're dealing with clients and those who you rely on for business and your reputation, you want to make sure whoever you're hiring is equipped to handle what will invariably be some difficult people they'll encounter, and they have to do it with a smile on their face. Easier said than done.
Exactly. Yeah. So did we do
Well,
it?
I think we did. I think we've covered the 12. If you have gotten this far with us, please visit our website, fourcornerresources.com. We'll link this blog, and we'll add some other links that you can reference. We have hundreds of blogs on hiring situations, interview questions you can ask by job title, in every scenario. So thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.